Weeks after burying my husband, my sister put me and my daughter on the street. The house is in my name. Learn to survive like the rest of us. I'm a nurse. A clinic turned me down. An old woman collapsed in their lobby. I kept her alive till the medics came. The richest man in town dropped to his knees and said 3 words that changed my life. The clock over the front desk said 4:38 on a Thursday, and there were 11 people in that waiting room. I know it was 11 because I counted them afterward, the way you count things once they are already over. I had on my good blouse, the navy one with the real buttons, ironed that morning on the end of a bed. My hair was up. I had a folder in my hand with a resume in it that I did not need anymore, because the woman behind that desk had already decided, and the woman behind that desk was my sister. Angela did not look up. She had the appointment book open in front of her, and she was running a pen down it like a grocery list. "We went another direction," she said. Not quietly, not leaning in the way you do when you are about to say something hard to somebody. She said it at counter volume, the same volume she used for copays and for telling people the doctor was running behind, and every chair in that room heard it. A man with his arm in a sling stopped scrolling. A young mother turned her stroller a few degrees toward us. In the third chair from the door, an old woman in a green cardigan looked up from a magazine she had not been reading. "Okay," I said. That was all of it. That was my whole answer. Quick pause before we continue. I'm Clara, the woman behind this channel. I write these stories because I love that little moment when strangers from different places end up feeling the same thing. If this one already pulled you in, stay with me. It goes deeper from here. "Okay," I said. That was all of it. That was my whole answer. My keys were in my left hand, and I remember closing my fist around them, and the little hard blue case on the ring pressed into my palm, the one with the strip of white tape across the hinge. That case had ridden around on my keys since April, and for most of that time, I had not been able to look straight at it. "You can leave the folder," Angela said, still not looking up. "I'll put it in the file." She wanted me to hand it to her in front of 11 people. I set it on the counter instead, square with the edge, and I turned around to walk out into the heat. That is when I heard the sound behind me. It is not a dramatic sound. That is the thing nobody tells you. It is a chair leg scraping, then 2 quick steps that are not going anywhere, then a body hitting a table. The old woman in the green cardigan had stood up. She got 2 steps out of that third chair and went down into the little magazine table, and the table went over with her, and the room made one noise altogether. And then it made no noise at all. I was already moving before I decided anything. She was on her back half under the table with her glasses knocked up into her hair, and there was that awful little catching sound in her throat that people who are not in the business think is breathing. It is not breathing. It is the last of the air leaving a body that has already quit. I got 2 fingers on the side of her neck. Nothing. I put my ear down with my eyes on her chest. Nothing. "Everybody back up," Angela said. "Everybody back up. The ambulance is on the way." She came around the end of the desk with her hand out, and she put that hand on my shoulder, and she pulled. "Whitney, you don't work here." I was already on my knees. I got the heel of my hand on the woman's breastbone and locked my elbows and started. And by the second push, my sister's hand came off my shoulder because it had to. Somebody's phones was on speaker with the dispatcher on it. The young mother backed the stroller into the corner and stood in front of it with both hands over her mouth. The floor was that low commercial carpet they put in clinics, hard as a parking lot. My knees were numb inside of a minute. I counted out loud because it steadies me. Somewhere in there, I heard the receptionist, the older one, the one with the reading glasses on a chain, say, "Let her, Angela." Just that. At 30 compressions, I stopped and took my keys out of my pocket. I want to tell you what that was, because it matters more than any of the rest of it. On my keyring, there is a hard blue plastic case about the size of a deck of cards. Inside it is a pocket mask, folded flat with a one-way valve. Every medic and half the nurses I know carry one. Mine had a strip of white medical tape across the hinge because the case cracked when it hit the kitchen floor at 2 in the morning on the 17th of April, and I taped it myself, sitting on that kitchen floor after the men had gone and taken my husband with them. For 8 weeks after that night, I could not make my thumb push that lid. It rode around in my pocket, taped shut, through everything that came next. The tape on it that Thursday was 5 days old, put on standing at a motel sink at 6 in the morning. And when I did it, I could not have told you why I was doing it. I pushed it open in that lobby. It came open like nothing, like it had never been anything. I seated the mask, gave 2 breaths, watched her chest come up, and went back down on her sternum. 9 minutes. I have looked at the run sheet since, and it says 9 minutes, which is nothing on paper and is the longest thing I have ever done. About 4 minutes in, her color came back into her face a little, which happens when the compressions are good, and it is a lie your eyes tell you and you do not stop. And at 6 minutes, the man with the sling knelt down and held her head straight because I asked him to. The bay doors opened at 9, and the medics came through with the cot, and the one in front was a big gray-headed man with 30 years on him. He got a hand on her wrist while I was still going, and then he looked at me. Not at my clothes. At me. Keep going. 2 more, then we swap. We swapped. They got the monitor on her. And then that thing happened that I have seen 4 times in my whole career, where the room stops being a room full of people and becomes one thing all facing one direction. And the big medic said, "We've got a pulse." And somebody behind me made a sound like they had been holding their breath for the entire 9 minutes. I sat back on my heels. My hands would not stop. The blue case was upside down on the carpet by my knee with the tape holding, and the glass door at the front opened again. The man who came through it was maybe 50, in a quarter-zip pullover and khakis, with reading glasses pushed up on his head and his phone still in his hand. And I did not know him. But I knew the name, because everybody in Washington County knows that name. It is on the wing of the hospital where I did my clinicals. It is on the baseball fields, off Silver Lake Road. He came across that lobby without looking at one person in it. He went down on both knees on the carpet next to me, so hard I heard them land. And he looked at the woman in the green cardigan. And then he looked at me and took my hand out of my lap with both of his. "That's my mother," he said. 8 weeks before that man knelt down on that carpet, my sister put my furniture out on the front lawn of the house we grew up in. It was a Wednesday in the middle of June, and it was 96 degrees on Cherokee Avenue. Nobody yelled. That is the part people get wrong when they imagine it. There was no screaming, no police, no scene. There was just my kitchen table upside down on the grass with its legs in the air, 4 black garbage bags of my clothes, and my daughter's mattress leaned against the porch rail with the fitted sheet still on it. The screen door was propped open with my mother's yellow vinyl kitchen chair. That chair had been in that kitchen since before I could see over the table. Somebody had dragged it out onto the porch to hold the door so they could carry things through faster. Kyle came out with Ruby's booster seat under one arm. My brother-in-law, 43, parts counter at the Ag Supply out on Nowata Road. He walked it down the steps and put it in the back of his truck instead of my car. And when he saw me watching, he said, "It was in the garage." At the curb, my Aunt Marcia sat in the passenger seat of her Buick, with the engine running and the air on. My mother's sister. She taught my Sunday school class, and she made 2 pans of potatoes for Travis's funeral 8 weeks before. She did not get out of that car. She looked at the dashboard for most of it, and one time she looked at me, and then she looked back at the dashboard. Angela stood on the top step with her arms crossed, in scrubs she does not need for the job she has, because the administrator of a family clinic does not touch a patient and she wears them anyway. "You've had 2 months," she said. "This isn't sudden." "Ruby's asleep in the car," I said. "Then you should get going before she wakes up." She uncrossed her arms and she said the rest of it looking out at the street, at the Decker's yard across the way. Not at me. "The house is in my name, Whitney. Learn to survive like the rest of us." I made 21 trips. I counted those too. From the grass to the trunk of a 2011 Corolla and back, 21 times, in 96 degrees. The bags of clothes went in first because they squash. Then Ruby's things, because if it came down to it, I was leaving my own. The kitchen table did not fit, and it is still not mine. Nobody helped me. Angela went inside on the 4th trip, and I heard the swamp cooler kick on through the window. Halfway through, Gene Wilkerson came across from the house on the corner. He is 74, and he was carrying a plastic tumbler of ice water with both hands, the way you do when your hands shake. He did not ask a single question. He held it out. I drank the whole thing standing on the grass. "Thank you," I said, and I gave him the cup back, and I went and got the next bag. That is the whole of what I did. For a long time afterward, people wanted me to say I told her off, and I did not tell her off. I said thank you to a 74-year-old man for a glass of water, and I loaded a Corolla. Here is why it landed the way it landed. That house on Cherokee Avenue was our mother's, and our mother put it in Angela's name in 2016 when she got sick, because Angela was the older one, and Angela was there that week. And because Mom did not want to think about it for more than one afternoon, nobody argued. I did not argue. I was 30 at the time, and I had a husband, and I did not think about paper. But when the roof went in 2019, it was me who paid for it. $4,600 out of the account Travis and I kept for a down payment. We never got around to needing. The property tax came off my bank draft every December for 6 years. And when Mom needed somebody in the last 9 months, I did the nights, because I was the nurse. I never asked for anything in writing. Not one time. Asking would have meant saying out loud that I thought she might do this. She did not steal a thing. I want to be clear about that, because for 8 months people have wanted to hand me a word like stole, and I will not take it. She kept what was already in her name. That is all she did. And that is exactly why it worked. And she did it 8 weeks after I did 11 minutes of compressions on my husband on our kitchen floor, while my daughter stood in the hall in her pajamas. Travis was 39, a lineman for the co-op, and on the 17th of April, he stood up from the table to take his plate to the sink and did not make it. I did 11 minutes. He was gone before I ever got my hands on him. I know that the way I know the sun is hot, and part of me will be arguing with it for the rest of my life. So that is what my sister meant by 2 months. That was the 2 months. We spent that night at the Rambler Motel on the highway, the U-shaped one, with the doors that open onto the parking lot, $41 plus tax. Ruby took the bed by the window because she likes to see the sign. She was fine, is the thing. Kids are terrible and wonderful that way. She ate half a gas station sandwich and asked if the pool was real, and it was not. It had a chain across it and a sign. Then she got quiet, in that way she has, with the blanket up under her chin. "Mom, is Daddy's toolbox still in the garage?" It was the red one, the rolling one with the dent in the second drawer, and it was too heavy for me to have gotten into that trunk if I had made 100 trips. "It's still in the garage. Baby," I said. The next morning I drove past the house on my way to drop her at the library reading program because I wanted to see whether Angela had put the yellow chair back in the kitchen. The garage door was up. The garage was empty, swept. Nothing in it but a rectangle of clean concrete where the toolbox had sat for 6 years. And out at the fence, tied on with orange baling twine, there was a piece of poster board with "Yard Sale." Sat 8 a.m. on it in my sister's handwriting. I told myself I was not going to that yard sale. I told myself that Thursday night, and again Friday morning, and Friday afternoon, I put $80 in cash in my pocket, which is what you do when you have already decided. Saturday, I dropped Ruby at Kyle's mother's for the morning, which I hated and did anyway. And I got to Cherokee Avenue at 9, an hour in, because I did not want to be the first car there, and I did not want to be the last. They had it laid out on the grass in the same spot my kitchen table had been. There were folding tables from the church. There was a coffee can with the money in it, and a beach towel over the arm of my mother's recliner to keep the sun off the fabric, which is the kind of thing Angela does, taking care of a thing while she sells it. My mother's Fostoria was on the second table, the pressed glass she got in pieces over 4 years of grocery store stamps in the 70s. $3 a piece on masking tape. The blue platter that only came out at Thanksgiving, $6. Her recliner, $40. A milk crate of Ruby's outgrown snow boots that were not Angela's to sell, but were also, if you want to be technical about it, in that garage. And at the end of the last table up on its casters, with a strip of masking tape across the lid, was Travis's toolbox. $40. She had written it in markers in the same handwriting as the sign. There were maybe 15 people in that yard. Mrs. Decker from across the street. A man I did not know loading a bed frame. 2 women from the church who both said hi to me at the same time, and then did not say anything else. Gene Wilkerson standing at the end of his own driveway with a hose in his hand, not watering anything. Kyle saw me first. He was standing by the coffee can, and he took his hat off and put it back on. "Hey, Whit." I did not answer him. I walked down the row, and I put my hand flat on the lid of that toolbox, and I could feel where the dent in the second drawer was without looking, because I had put that dent there myself in 2018, backing into it with a laundry basket. Angela came over. She had a fanny pack on for the change, and she was in a good mood, the kind she gets around a project. "That's Travis's," I said. It was in the garage. Same 4 words as Kyle. They had settled on them together, is what that means. "I'll take it. It's 40. I stood there for a second. I want you to understand that there was a way out of that moment where I raised my voice, and every person in that yard was standing very still, waiting to see if I would take it, and I could feel them being ready to tell it later. My sister has spent her whole life setting up rooms where the only 2 choices are be quiet or be the crazy one. I took 2 20s out of my pocket and I put them in the coffee can myself so she would not have to hand me change. "Thank you," I said. She said, "Well, you're welcome," in a voice that went up at the end because I had done it wrong. Then she said, louder than she needed to nobody, "Everything's gotta go today, y'all. I've got renters coming Monday." I got that toolbox down the sidewalk to my car on its casters, over the seam in the concrete, and the wheels caught and it went over on its side, and the second drawer came out, and Travis's sockets went all over the sidewalk in front of 15 people. Gene Wilkerson dropped the hose and came over. Mrs. Decker came over. A boy of about 12 I have never met before, or since got down on the concrete and started matching sockets to the little clips by size, muttering the numbers, doing it right, Nobody said one word about my sister. We picked up a toolbox on a sidewalk in the sun, and it took 4 minutes. And it was the kindest 4 minutes I had had in 2 months. When I looked back up the yard, Angela was showing a woman how the recliner reclined. The church version got to me by Sunday afternoon. I did not go to service. I have not been able to sit in that sanctuary since the funeral, and I do not have an explanation that satisfies anybody, including me. But my Aunt Marcia went, and Marcia sits at the second table on the left in the fellowship hall afterward, where they do coffee in styrofoam cups, and there is always a coffee cake somebody's daughter made. A woman named Bonnie Frizzell called me Sunday at 4, and Bonnie has never once in her life called anybody to comfort them. She called to find out. "Honey, I just want you to know we're all praying for you. Angela said you've been having a hard time since Travis." "I'm all right." "She said you haven't been able to work." A pause with a whole sentence in it. "And that Ruby's been in the car a lot." That was the version. It was already built and it was already moving, and I had not been in the room when they poured it. She has not been right since Travis. It is such a good lie because it is 9/10 true. I had not worked since April 17th. My daughter had in fact spent a lot of that week in a car. Every fact in it was correct, and the whole thing was a lie. And there is no way to argue with a thing like that without sounding exactly like the person they are describing. "Bonnie," I said, "did Angela tell y'all where we slept Wednesday night?" There was a silence on that phone that lasted long enough for me to hear a television going in her house. "Well," she said, "I'm sure it'll all work out in the family. Monday morning, the school got me. Ruby's school does registration verification at the end of June for the fall, and the woman in the front office at the elementary is named Denise, and she has been there 20 years, and she was kind about it, which somehow made it worse. I just need a current proof of residence, hun. Utility bill, lease, mortgage statement, anything with the address on it." I put a motel receipt on the counter. $41 plus tax. The Rambler. 3 nights. She looked at it for a while. She did not touch it. "I can't take that. I'm sorry. It's got to be a residence." "I'm working on the residence." "I know you are." She wrote something on a sticky note and did not look up while she wrote it. "The district gives you until they build the class lists. If we don't have something by then, she comes off the roster and she'd go wherever the address we do have puts her. The address they did have was 1104 Cherokee Avenue, which is in my sister's name, which means that if I did nothing on paper, my daughter lived with Angela. I sat in the Corolla in that parking lot for probably 10 minutes with the engine off and my hands in my lap. That is the closest I came to calling somebody. There is a lawyer, Bill Trantham, who has an office over the flower shop on Johnstone, and he did Travis's father's estate, and I had his card in the glove box. I did not call him. Not that day, not any day. I want to be honest that it was not wisdom. It was that I had $680 to my name, and I knew what a retainer costs, and I knew what it does to a family to bring a man like that into it. And I knew, sitting there, that a lawyer could get me maybe a hearing about a house that was legitimately, honestly not mine. What I needed was an address and a paycheck. Those are the 2 things that were actually broken. So I did the thing I had been avoiding for 8 weeks, which was open my phone and start calling places to ask for a job. I made 11 calls that Monday. I am a registered nurse in the state of Oklahoma with an active license and 7 years of med-surg at a hospital in Tulsa and 2 years of home health across Washington County. There is a nursing shortage. Everybody knows there is a nursing shortage. It is on billboards. 4 of the numbers went to a website. 3 took a message. 2 said they were not hiring. 1 was a home health agency out of Owasso, where the woman got very warm and then very careful in the space of about 4 seconds after she asked where I had been working most recently. And I said I had been off since April because my husband died. And she said, "Oh, honey." And then she said they would keep my information. And one was Caney Valley Family Medicine on Frank Phillips Boulevard, which had a full-time RN position posted on the Indeed page that I was looking at while the phone rang, and the phone was answered by my sister. "Caney Valley, this is Angela." I hung up. I am not proud of it. I sat on the end of a motel bed and hung up on my own sister, and my face was hot like I was the one who had done something. Tuesday, the partial break came, and it came from the least likely direction in this entire story. Angela had renters lined up for that house. $1,100 a month, a young couple. He works at the plant in Bartlesville, and she does something at the bank. They came Monday evening with a tape measure. Kyle told his mother about it, and Kyle's mother told Ruby, because that is the kind of house Ruby was spending mornings in. They backed out Tuesday. Here is why, and I only know it because Gene Wilkerson told me later, standing at that same driveway with that same hose. The young man came out to look at the yard, and Gene was out front. And the young man asked him, friendly, how the neighborhood was, and whether the owner was any good about repairs. And Gene Wilkerson, 74 years old, said, "The owner put her widowed sister's furniture out on that grass in 96 degrees last Wednesday and watched her carry it to the car by herself. That's what I know about the owner." They did not sign. Angela had the house empty and swept, and a mortgage-free property doing nothing at all. And it stayed that way for the next 11 weeks. And every single one of those weeks, she blamed on me. And the next Wednesday, the 2nd of July, at 2:40 in the afternoon, my phone rang from a Dewey number. Cedar Hall is a 54-bed nursing facility 7 miles north of Bartlesville, on the road out toward the county line. Everybody in healthcare in this county knows Cedar Hall. It is not a bad place. It is an understaffed place, which is a different thing. And the shift nobody in the state of Oklahoma wants is 11 at night to 7 in the morning on the memory care hall. The director of nursing is a woman named Sheila Ratzlaff. She talked to me for 9 minutes. She asked about my license, my last hospital, and whether I could pass a drug screen. She did not ask why I had been off since April. When I told her anyway, because I had decided I was going to say it out loud before somebody else did, she said, "April. Okay." And then, "Can you start Monday?" I said yes, standing in a motel parking lot in the heat coming up off the asphalt, with my daughter inside the room watching cartoons, with the sound off because I had asked her to. I want to say what that was. And then I want to move on because it was not a miracle and I am not going to dress it up. It was 11 to 7 on the worst hall in the building at $26 an hour, and I took it inside of 9 minutes. But it meant something in this story that has nothing to do with money. My sister had spent 2 weeks telling a town that I could not be trusted with a patient, and a woman who had never met me, who runs the hardest hall in this county, put me on the schedule after a 9-minute phone call. At the end of that call, while I was writing down the address of the place on the back of a motel receipt, Sheila said something in passing, the way you say a thing that is nothing to you. "You'd be my 3rd RN. I've had a posting up since April, and I've got nothing, and I'm not the only one. That clinic in town's had a full-time RN ad running since the middle of April, and they still haven't filled it. 11 weeks. It's brutal out there right now." I stood in that parking lot with a pen in my hand. 11 weeks. A full-time RN opening, still open, at the clinic on Frank Phillips Boulevard, where my sister sits at the desk that every application in that building has to pass across. My first night at Cedar Hall was the Monday after the 4th of July. They put me on the memory care hall with an aide named Destiny, who is 23, and better at that job than most nurses I have worked with. 22 residents. 1 hall, 1 med cart. one bathroom light left on all night at the far end because a man named Mr. Prentice cannot sleep unless he can see it. At about 2 in the morning, somebody in town was still setting off fireworks out past the highway, and every pop came through those windows, and the whole hall woke up at once. 4 call lights. A woman in 118 crying in the doorway in a nightgown. Sure, it was gunfire. Sure, her son was outside. You do not correct her. You do not say, "Ma'am, it's fireworks." You put your hand on her arm and you say his name, and you tell her he is fine, he called. He is fine. And you walk her back, and you sit on the edge of the bed until her breathing goes long. I got home to the motel at 7:40 in the morning with my shoes in my hand and my daughter eating cereal out of a styrofoam cup. And I felt, for about 90 seconds, completely like myself. That is what I want on the record before the rest of this. It was not the clinic that fixed me. I was already working, but I applied to Caney Valley anyway. I applied because 11 weeks is 11 weeks, and because I had spent 2 months being told a story about myself that I had never once been given a chance to answer. And somewhere under all of that, I wanted to know, not to win anything, to know. So on the 9th of July, I put on the navy blouse for the first time, and I drove down Frank Phillips Boulevard, and I parked in front of that clinic at 10 in the morning, and I did not go in. I sat there 20 minutes. Then I did the coward's version of brave. I found the fax number on the website, and I drove to the UPS store by the Walmart, and I paid $2.75 to fax my resume to a machine that sits 4 feet from my sister's chair. Thursday afternoon, my phone rang from a number I did not know. "Is this Whitney Kirkendall? This is Craig Yoakum over at Caney Valley. I've got your resume in my hand." He is 58, and he has run that clinic for 22 years, and he talks fast and apologizes for it. He wanted to know if I could come in Friday at 7:30 in the morning, before they opened, because that was the only hole he had. I said I could. I was going to be coming off a night shift, and I said I could. I got there at 7:20 Friday. There were 4 cars in that lot, and the front door was locked, and Dr. Yoakum came and opened it himself in a golf shirt with his reading glasses on his head. He walked me back past the empty front desk, past the dark waiting room with the chairs all pushed in, into a break room with a card table and a refrigerator with a sticky note on it about somebody's yogurt. We talked for 40 minutes. I want to be careful here, because this is the part that hurt the most later. It was a good interview. It was the kind of conversation 2 people in the same line of work have when they are relieved to find each other. He asked how I would triage a walk-in chest pain with 1 exam room open. He asked what I would do about the thing where the same 6 diabetics never come back for their 3-month checks. I told him what we did in Tulsa, which is that you stop mailing them a card and you call them yourself at 4 in the afternoon, and it works, and it is boring, and nobody wants to do it. He wrote that down. A man like that writing something you said on a legal pad is a very specific feeling. At the end, he asked about the gap, April to July. I told him. I said my husband died at home on the 17th of April, that I did compressions on him for 11 minutes, and that I did not work for 8 weeks after that, and that I had been on nights at Cedar Hall since the beginning of the month, and was looking to move to days because of my daughter. He did not say, "Oh, honey." He tapped his pen twice and said, "That's about how long it takes." He walked me back out through the dark waiting room. At the front door, he shook my hand, and he said this, and I am going to give it to you exactly, because I have had a lot of time to think about the exact words. "I want you to meet my partner. He's out until Monday. Tuesday morning, can you do Tuesday? Bring your license. We'll get the background stuff going." I said Tuesday. He was still standing there in the doorway when I got in my car, and he lifted his hand off the doorframe at me. And that is the last time I heard from Craig Yoakum for 11 days. On the way out, I stopped at the front desk to leave my phone number on a sticky note because I did not entirely trust a fax and a legal pad. The desk was still empty. The lights had come up in the waiting room by then, and I stood there for a second and looked at the wall. There is a plaque on the wall in that lobby, brass on a wood back up by the corner where the hallway starts. The Halstead Family Foundation. Below that, the year, and a line about the Community Health Fund. Everybody in this county grows up with that name, the way you grow up with the water tower. Halstead is on the east wing of the hospital. Halstead is on the 2 ball fields off Silver Lake Road. There is a Halstead scholarship that 2 kids from the high school get every May. Old Bartlesville oil money. 3 generations of it now, mostly gone quiet and local the way that money does. And I stood there in that lobby with a sticky note in my hand, and I thought about my sister. Because Angela's whole standing in this town is built on that wall. She sat on the auxiliary board with a Halstead cousin for 2 years. She does the flowers for that foundation's luncheon at the country club in October. At the fellowship hall, she is the one who says, "Well, Doug's people put up half of that," in the voice of somebody who was in the room. She has spent 15 years making sure that when people in this town say her name, the next thing they think of is that family. I did not know a single one of those people. I could not have told you what Doug Halstead looked like. I want that clear because of what happened later. Tuesday came. I got off at Cedar Hall at 7, went to the motel, showered, put the blouse on, and sat on the end of the bed with my phone face up on the nightstand from 8 until noon. Nobody called. At 12:30, I decided I had misheard him, that he had meant he would call to set Tuesday up, and that made me feel better for about an hour. Wednesday, I called the clinic. Angela answered. I hung up. Thursday, I called at 12:15, when a front desk goes to lunch coverage, and a different voice picked up, an older woman. Caney Valley, this is Vicky. I asked if Dr. Yoakum was available. She said he was with a patient. I gave her my name and said I had interviewed Friday and was following up. She was quiet for a second, and then she said, Kirkendall, K-I-K. Yes, ma'am. Hold on. I heard her put the phone against her shirt. When she came back, she had changed. Not unfriendly. Careful. Honey, I'm going to take your number down again. On my own pad. That was it. That was the whole thing. A 62-year-old scheduler who has worked that front desk for 19 years wrote my number on her own pad instead of the one on the counter and did not explain why. And neither did I. Nobody called Thursday. Nobody called Friday. That weekend was the worst one. And it is the weekend the little blue case came back. We had moved to the weekly rate at the Rambler by then, $190 a week, which is not cheaper than an apartment. It is just payable on a Friday. Ruby had a routine going. She had the drawer under the TV and a library card and a way of making the bed that involved tucking the corners like the housekeeper did. Saturday, I did laundry at the place on Comanche with the machines that eat quarters. And while a load was going, I sat in one of those plastic chairs and took my keys out to get the little pocket knife off the ring, because there was a tag on Ruby's new shirt. And there it was in my hand, the blue case, the white tape across the hinge, gone gray at the edges, fuzzed up with pocket lint. I want to tell you what that case is all the way, because in a couple of weeks, it is going to be the only thing in this story that matters. Every nurse carries something. Some people carry trauma shears. Some carry a pen light. I have carried a pocket mask on my keys since my second year on the floor because of a man who went down in the parking garage at St. John's while I was walking to my car in 2016, and I did compressions on him for 6 minutes with nothing between us. And afterward, I sat in my car and shook, and then I ordered a mask off the internet that night. It has been on my keys ever since, through my wedding, through Ruby, through 9 years. On the 17th of April, when Travis went down, that key ring was on the counter by the bowl where we always put them. I got it. I remember getting it, and the case hit the tile, and the hinge cracked, and I used it anyway, and I did 11 minutes, and none of it made any difference at all. At 2-something in the morning, after the medics were gone, after his mother had come, I was sitting on that kitchen floor with my back against the dishwasher, and I found the case on the floor under the edge of the cabinet with the lid hanging off. And I got the medical tape out of the drawer where we kept the batteries, and I taped the hinge, and I put it back on my key ring. I have thought about why I did that a lot. The honest answer is that at 2 in the morning, it was a small thing I could fix. But it stayed on the key ring for 8 weeks after, and I never opened it once. And that was not sentiment. It was that opening would have been a decision. Taking it off would have been a decision too. The loudest one. It would have meant I was a person who had stopped carrying it. So I did neither. I let it ride around in my pocket, taped shut, and I made no decision at all for 8 weeks. About anything. I sat in a laundromat on Comanche Avenue with that thing in my palm, and I thought, you kept it. Through all of it, you kept it on your keys. Then the dryer buzzed, and I folded my daughter's shirts. Monday, I called the clinic one more time. Vicky answered and said Dr. Yokum was out that afternoon, and that she would leave it on his desk. She sounded like she wanted to say more. She did not. Tuesday, the 22nd of July, at 6:12 in the evening, I was standing in the parking lot of the Rambler with a bag of ice for the cooler, because the little motel refrigerator had quit, and my phone buzzed in my back pocket. It was a text. It came from the clinic's main number. The one on the sign, the one on the bottom of the appointment reminders. The one that sits on the desk 4 feet from where my sister writes in the appointment book. We've decided to go another direction. Best of luck. 9 words. No name on it. Sent at 6:12 at night from a general line. 12 days after a man shook my hand at a door and said, "Bring your license." I stood in that parking lot holding a bag of ice until my hand hurt from the cold. The last week of July was the week I lost the most, and almost none of it was money. It started with my daughter. Angela's youngest turned 10 that Saturday, and they did the party at the splash pad at Sooner Park, and Ruby was invited because Ruby is 7, and nobody had told the 7-year-olds anything. I thought about not letting her go. I could not come up with a version of that sentence that made sense to a child. So I dropped her at the curb at 1 o'clock with a wrapped present I bought at the Walmart. And I sat in the McDonald's on Washington for 2 hours. Because I did not want to be at the motel by myself. I picked her up at 3. She was sunburned across the shoulders, and she had a goodie bag, and she was happy. And she talked about the sprinklers the whole way back. Then we got to the room, and she stopped in the doorway with the key card in her hand. She has a way of standing very still when she has been holding something. "Mom, Aunt Angela says you can't be a nurse anymore because of Daddy." I did not say anything for a second, and a second is too long, and she saw it. She said it to Sherry in the kitchen. She was working it out while she said it, the way kids do, arranging the pieces to see if they made a shape. She said you got too sad to do it, and that's why we don't have the house. I got down on my knees on that carpet in front of my 7-year-old. "Baby, I work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday night. I'm a nurse right now. I'm a nurse tonight at 11 o'clock. But you're sad." "I'm both," I said. "Those go together. That's allowed." She thought about it, and then she asked if she could have the pop from the goodie bag. And I said yes, and she was fine. And I went in the bathroom and ran the water and stood there with a towel against my face. That is the thing they do not tell you about a lie like my sister's. It does not stay out in the town where you can fight it. It comes home, in the mouth of a 7-year-old, in a doorway, with a goodie bag. Monday, I sold Travis's truck. It was a 2014 Silverado with 190,000 on it, and a toolbox in the bed, and a co-op sticker in the back window. It had been sitting in a fenced lot on Adams where a man Travis used to work with let me leave it, and the plates were about to come due, and the insurance was $91 a month I did not have. The man who bought it found the ad on Facebook. We met in the parking lot of the Sonic on Washington at 11 in the morning, because that is where people in this town meet to do things like that. He was maybe 30 with a girlfriend in the car, and he was decent about it. He knocked around under the hood, drove it out to the Frank Phillips light and back, and offered $2,300 cash on a $2,900 ask. I said, okay. I did not counter. I had a rent deposit to make, and there was nothing in that truck that was worth $600 of arguing. He counted it out on the hood in hundreds. I signed the title on the hood too, and I had to ask him for a pen. And while I was writing my name in the seller's box, the girlfriend said from the car window, "Was this your husband's?" And I said yes, and she said, "I'm sorry." And that was the only condolence I got that entire week that did not have a job for me to do attached to it. I sat there and watched a stranger back my husband's truck out of a Sonic stall. Then I ordered a large Diet Coke because I was already parked, and it came to $2.11, and I paid it out of the $2,300. Tuesday, the duplex. There is a property management outfit here that handles about half the rentals in town, a storefront on Dewey Avenue with a woman named Rhonda at the front desk and a bell on the door. I had found a 2-bedroom duplex on Osage, $650 a month, water paid. I had the deposit in cash in an envelope in my purse. I had my last 2 pay stubs from Cedar Hall, which is not much history, but it is real money and it is verifiable. She got about 4 lines into the application and stopped. Previous landlord? I lived at 1104 Cherokee Avenue for 6 years. Was it in your name? No, ma'am. Whose name? My sister's. Rhonda's pen came off the page. Okay, so then she'd be your landlord, technically. I just need her on the reference line, and I need to be able to call her. She's not going to give me a reference. Rhonda looked up at me then, and here is the part I did not see coming, because she was not being cruel. She was being a person in a small town who had just heard something that did not add up. Well, why not? Honey, it's a 5-minute phone call. This is why I love making these stories. People think silence means weakness until the proof is already in the room. Stay with me. We're right at that point. Not add up. Well, why not? Honey, it's a 5-minute phone call. Why wouldn't your own sister sign a rental reference? There is no answer to that question. I have had 8 months to build one, and there still is not. Anything true takes 20 minutes and makes you sound exactly like a person with a story. So I said, "We don't speak." And Rhonda said, and wrote something in a box and told me she could run it without a landlord reference, but that with no rental history and no reference, it would go to the owner, and the owner would probably want a cosigner or 3 months up front. 3 months up front was $1,950, plus deposit. I had $2,900 and change in the world, including my husband's truck. I said, "Let me think about it." I walked out with the bell going off behind me. Wednesday, my aunt stopped answering. Marcia Boydston has answered the phone on the second ring my entire life. She is my mother's younger sister. She kept me on Fridays when I was in grade school. She sat in the 3rd row at my wedding, and she made 2 pans of scalloped potatoes for the funeral in April and stayed after to wash them. She sat in the car at the curb on Cherokee Avenue and did not get out. I called her Wednesday at 10 in the morning, which is when she is home. It rang 4 times, and went to the machine that still has my uncle's voice on it, and he has been gone since 2019. I called again Thursday. Same thing. Thursday afternoon, she called me back and talked for 6 minutes about the heat and her knee, and the man who was supposed to come look at her air conditioner. At minute 6, I said, "Aunt Marcia, we're at the Rambler." She said, "I know where you're at, sweetheart." And then, because I was tired and because it was Thursday, I said, "Then why won't you say anything to her?" And my Aunt Marcia said, the sentence that I will remember longer than anything my sister said to me. She said it kindly. That is what makes it what it is. Whitney, I've got to have all of you. Don't make me pick. Just don't complicate things, and it'll settle out. Don't complicate things. 2 people had done a thing, and one of them had a house, and one of them had a motel room. And the word for fixing it was complicate. That Sunday was the family dinner. They do it at Marcia's, first Sunday of the month, and have since my mother died. 10, 12 people. Kyle's mother brings the beans. Nobody called me. Not Marcia, not my cousin Renee. Nobody. I found out it had happened because Renee posted a picture of the table Sunday night, and my aunt's yellow tablecloth was on it. And there were 9 people in the frame, and my sister was standing behind the chair I used to sit in with her hand on the back of it. That is what erasing looks like in a real family. Not a scene. A photograph you were not in. Posted at 7:40 on a Sunday night with 4 heart reactions. And then Tuesday night, the chair. I drove past the house that night. I want to be honest about that too. I drove past that house maybe twice a week that whole month, on the way from the motel to Cedar Hall. And it is not on the way. It is 6 blocks out of the way. I did it anyway. It was about 10 o'clock. And the streetlight on that corner has been out since Obama. The house was dark, empty, still $1,100 a month of nothing, because a 74-year-old man told the truth to a young couple with a tape measure. Wednesday is trash day on Cherokee Avenue, and out at the curb, in front of the mailbox, on top of 2 black bags and a box fan with a broken grill, was my mother's yellow vinyl kitchen chair, tube steel legs. That yellow vinyl seat with the piping around the edge, split along the front lip since about 1994, and mended with a strip of duct tape that had gone the color of a manila envelope. That chair was under the wall phone in that kitchen for 30 years. My mother sat in it to shell peas and to pay bills and to talk to her sister. She sat in it the week she came home from the hospital, because it was the only seat in the house, with arms the right height to push up from. It held the screen door open on the day they put my furniture on the grass. And now it was at the curb with a box fan. I drove to the end of the block and I sat at the stop sign with my blinker on for a long time, and nobody came, because it is Cherokee Avenue at 10 at night. Then I turned around and I went back and I parked with the engine running. And I got out and I put my mother's chair in the trunk of a Corolla. And it did not fit, so I put the back seat down and slid it in through from the inside with the legs sticking up. And I drove to the Rambler with a kitchen chair riding in my back seat like a passenger. I did not cry about the house. I did not cry when they took the toolbox or when the man drove off in Travis's truck. I sat in that parking lot at 10:40 at night with a yellow chair in the back of my car, and I put my head on the steering wheel, and I came apart for about 4 minutes. Then I went in and got in the shower before Ruby could see my face, and at 10:20 the next night, I clocked in at Cedar Hall. Thursday morning, the school called. It was Denise from the front office, and she had been holding it as long as she could hold it, and she said the class lists were being built Friday afternoon. "I need something by Friday, hun. If I don't have a residence for her by then, she comes off our roster." I said I understood. I said I was signing something that week. I did not have anything to sign. I hung up at 9:52 in the morning, standing in a motel parking lot in my scrubs, having slept 2 hours. At 9:58, my phone buzzed again, and it was my sister for the first time in 5 weeks. It was a photograph. She had taken it from the front door of 1104 Cherokee Avenue, looking into the living room. Bare floor, sun coming in, the dining room doorway at the back, and the kitchen light on beyond it. Under the picture, one line: "You can come home when you learn to ask nicely." I never answered that message. I want to be plain about it because for a long time afterward, people assumed there was a moment where I told my sister off, and there is not one anywhere in this story. I read, "You can come home when you learn to ask nicely, standing in a motel parking lot in my scrubs with 2 hours of sleep in me." And I put the phone in my pocket, and I went inside and made my daughter a sandwich. I did not call Bill Trantham either. His card stayed in the glove box of that Corolla until I cleaned it out in November, and it is in a drawer now, and I have never dialed it. Here is the arithmetic I did standing at that sink. The house was in her name. It had been in her name since 2016, and my mother signed it there on purpose. 6 years of property tax and $4,600 of roof does not make a deed. And a lawyer would have told me that in about 90 seconds and charged me $1,500 to keep telling me for a year. And there was a second reason, which is the one that actually decided it. The two things that were broken in my life that week were an address and a paycheck. Not a house. An address. I already had the paycheck. So on Thursday morning, instead of calling a lawyer, I called my boss. "Sheila, I need a letter." She did not ask why. I've thought about that a lot. She said, "Rate, hours, and hire date. Or do you need me to say more than that? Whatever a landlord wants to see." Then it'll say full-time, and it'll say, "I expect you to be here a long while." A pause. "You want my cell on it too?" "Yes, ma'am." She had it at the front desk in an envelope with my name on it when I clocked out at 7 the next morning, on Cedar Hall letterhead, signed, with her cell number written under the printed one in blue pen. The duplex I already knew about because I drive past it 4 times a week. It is on Delaware Street in Dewey, 7 miles north of Bartlesville, half a block off the road I take to work. Brick, 2 units, a shared driveway with a crack down the middle, and a mimosa tree in the yard dropping those pink things all over everything. There had been a hand-painted board in the window since the spring. For rent, no agency, and a phone number and marker. That is why I went there instead of back to Rhonda's storefront on Dewey Avenue. Not strategy. There was no agency, which meant there was no application that had a line on it for my sister's name. The man who owns it is named Leonard Pemberton, and he is 79, and he has owned those 2 units since 1988. He met me there Friday morning at 9 in a mesh cap, and we walked through it in 4 minutes, and it was $575 a month. Water and trash paid month to month, and the kitchen faucet dripped, and he told me it dripped before I could find out on my own. At the little table in the empty kitchen, he had a lease he had bought at an office supply store sometime in the last century, and he filled it out in pen, and he got to the part where it asks for references. "I've got one," I said, and I put Sheila's letter on the table. He read the whole thing, front to back, holding it out at arm's length. Then he took out a flip phone and called the cell number at the bottom of it, standing right there in that kitchen at 9:20 in the morning. And he said, "This is Leonard Pemberton in Dewey. I've got a Whitney Kirkendall sitting at my table wanting to rent a house." I could hear Sheila's voice through the phone, but not the words. It went on about 40 seconds. Then he said, "All right then," and hung up and picked his pen back up. "She says you're the only RN she's got who shows up early. $575, and the deposit, And I paid first month in deposit in cash out of the truck money, $1,150. And he wrote me a receipt on a pad that made a carbon copy. He gave me 2 keys on a ring with a piece of orange yarn on it. The lease says, Whitney Kirkendall on the tenant line. Mine. First thing in my whole life that ever had my name on it, and nobody else's. At 1:40 that afternoon, I was standing at the counter of the elementary school in Bartlesville with that lease in my hand, and the address on it was in Dewey. And that meant something I had not let myself work all the way through until Denise said it out loud. Hun, this is Dewey. She'd zoned to Dewey Elementary. I stood there. Ruby had been at that Bartlesville school since pre-K. Her class list came out that afternoon, and she was not going to be on it. There is a girl named Presley there who can do a cartwheel, and a librarian who saved her the dinosaur books, and a hallway with her handprint on a tile from kindergarten. Can I get her record sent to Dewey? I said. Denise looked at that lease for a second, at my name on the tenant line, and I watched something in her face that I will be grateful for as long as I live. She was relieved. Not sorry, relieved. I'll walk it over to the registrar myself, she said. You got it in time. I got it in time. That is the whole win right there, and it cost my daughter her school. I told Ruby in the car. She cried for about 6 minutes about Presley, and then she asked whether the new school had a gym, and I said I did not know. And she said, it probably does. And that was the end of it. Kids will hand you back your heart if you can just stand there and let them be sad for 6 minutes without trying to fix it. We moved Saturday. It took 2 trips in a Corolla and 40 minutes of Leonard's help with the mattresses. Because it turns out a 79-year-old man in a mesh cap will carry a child's mattress up a step for a person he has known for one day. The first thing I carried through that door was my mother's yellow chair. I put it at the little table in the kitchen, on the left side where a chair goes. The vinyl had a split along the front lip with duct tape gone the color of a manila envelope, and it did not match one other thing we owned, and it was the only piece of furniture in that house that had been anywhere before. That week, I worked 6 nights in a row. I want to put some of them in here because they are the actual reason this story ends the way it does, and because nobody was watching any of them. Monday at 3 a.m, a woman named Ida, who was 91, got out of bed on her own to go to the bathroom. And I heard the mat alarm and got there while she was on the floor between the bed and the wall. And she was not hurt. And the whole thing after that is about a hip that is not broken and a woman who is humiliated in her own room at 3 a.m. You do not lift her. You get down on the floor with her, and you talk to her about her sister in Nowati until the aide comes. And then you take 20 minutes putting her back to bed instead of 6, because 6 minutes teaches a person that she is a chore. Tuesday, mouth care. On a man 3 days from the end of his life who has not eaten since Thursday. Little pink sponge on a stick, water, 4 times a shift. There is no one to see you do it right. That is the entire test of that job. Thursday morning at 6:40, a daughter from Coffeyville who had driven down at 4 a.m. stood in the hall outside her father's room, and I told her what his night had been. And she said, "Was he scared?" And I said, "No, ma'am. He was warm and he had his lamp on and he asked about the dog twice." She put both hands on my forearms in that hallway and just held on for a second. That is the thing my sister told this town I could not do anymore. And the last morning at the Rambler, before we moved, I did the thing with the case. It was 6 a.m. Ruby was asleep in the bed by the window. I was standing at that little sink outside the bathroom with the mirror that had the light strip over it, and I had my keys in my hand because I had just come off shift, and I looked at that blue case. The tape was 4 months old, gray at the edges, furred over with pocket lint, and it had my own thumbprint in it from the night in April. I took the whole keyring apart. I peeled the old tape off and threw it in the trash can by the sink. I washed the case with hand soap and hot water, both halves, and I dried it on a motel towel. Then I opened it. The mask was in there folded, the way it is supposed to be, with the one-way valve seated, clean, sealed in its little sleeve, exactly the way it had been since the last time I closed it, which was on my kitchen floor at 2 in the morning on the 17th of April, with my husband already gone out the door. I stood there and looked at it for a while. That was the funeral, if you want to know. That was the closest thing I got to one that was actually mine. Then I closed it, and I got the roll of white medical tape out of the front pocket of my bag, and I put a new strip across the hinge, and I pressed it down with my thumb, and I put it back on my keys. I did not know what it was for. I want to be honest about that, because everybody afterward wanted it to be some kind of premonition, and it was not. It was a woman at a motel sink at 6 in the morning, cleaning her equipment because she was going back to work, which leaves the last thing, and it is the only decision in this entire story that I made on purpose. I decided I was not going to be dismissed by text message. A man named Craig Yoakum spent 40 minutes with me in a break room and wrote down what I said on a legal pad and shook my hand at a door and told me to bring my license on Tuesday. And what came back 12 days later at 6:12 in the evening was 9 words from a general phone number with no name on it. I did not want the job by then. That is the part I have trouble explaining. I had a lease with my name on it and 5 shifts a week and a daughter enrolled at a school with a gym. I did not need one thing from that clinic. I wanted somebody in that building to say it to my face, that was all. If it was no, I wanted it to be a person saying no, out loud, standing up, looking at me. And I had a fairly good idea of who was going to have to do it. So the next Thursday, I got Ruby settled with a neighbor girl, and I ironed the navy blouse on the end of a bed for the second time in my life. And at 4:20 in the afternoon, I drove down Frank Phillips Boulevard in a Corolla with the air conditioning on high, and I parked in front of Caney Valley Family Medicine. I sat there 5 minutes. Then I got out and crossed the lot with my keys in my left hand. At 4:38, I pulled that glass door open, and my sister looked up from the appointment book. "That's my mother," he said. He was holding my hand with both of his on the carpet in front of 11 people and a front desk and 2 medics, and my sister. He did not shake it. He held it the way you hold onto a rail on a boat. "You did this? You did this for her?" "Yes, sir." "Is she—" He could not get the rest of the sentence to come, and a man like that is not used to that happening to him. He looked at the cot. His mother had an oxygen mask on her face by then, and her eyes were half open, and she was looking at the ceiling tiles, and one of her house shoes was still on the floor by the magazine rack. The gray-headed medic answered him instead, and this is the part where the room turned, and it was not anything I did. "She had a pulse before we got the cot through that door," Randy Boren said. He said it to Doug Halstead, and he said it at the volume you use across a room. "I've been doing this 30 years. That doesn't happen. That happens when somebody starts good compressions inside of about a minute and doesn't quit. Whoever this lady is, she's the reason you're driving to the hospital instead of somewhere else." 11 people heard that. And the thing is, those same 11 people had already heard something else 4 minutes earlier, and they were now doing the arithmetic on it in real time, all at once, without anybody having to say a word. They had heard a woman at the front desk say we went another direction at counter volume. They had watched that same woman come around the end of the desk and put her hand on my shoulder and pull and say, "Whitney, you don't work here." The man with his arm in the sling was the one who said it out loud. He was standing by the window with his shirt untucked and his sling twisted from holding a stranger's head straight for 3 minutes. And he looked over at my sister and he said, not even angry, just puzzled, "You told her to get off her." Angela's mouth opened and nothing came out of it. That was the moment. Not the money, not the name on the plaque, not anything that happened afterward. A man with his arm in a sling, saying one true sentence in a waiting room. Craig Yoakum came out of the back hallway then, because he had heard the noise and finished with a patient and come out with his stethoscope still around his neck, into a lobby with a tipped-over magazine table and 2 medics, and a woman on the floor in a navy blouse. He looked at me for a second and a half. "Whitney?" "Hi, Dr. Yoakum. What are you—" And then he did not finish that either, because Randy was rolling the cot toward the doors, and Doug Halstead was up on his feet moving with it, and the whole thing went out into the heat, and the glass doors shut, and the lobby got extremely quiet. Craig Yoakum stood in the middle of his own waiting room. Then he turned around, and he said to the front desk, in a completely flat voice, "Vicky, bring me every RN application that's come across this desk since April." And Vicky Trammell, 62 years old, 19 years at that counter, reached under the ledge and took out a pad, her own pad, the one she writes her own numbers on. And she said her one sentence, the only one she ever said in this whole story. "There's only ever been the one, doctor, and I've had to write her number down twice." I have thought about Vicky more than almost anybody. She did not save me. She did not go to anybody or file anything or make a call. She noticed a thing was wrong in July, and she wrote a phone number on her own pad because she did not trust the counter. And then she waited 4 weeks for somebody to ask her a question. And when somebody finally asked, she answered it. That is what most people have in them. It is not nothing. Angela started talking then, and it went badly for her the way it always goes badly when somebody talks into a room that has already made up its mind. "Craig, this is family business. She's my sister. She lost her husband in April, and I'm not going to sit here and—" She got her voice level again, and she came back with the one that had worked all summer, the one that had worked at the yard sale and in the fellowship hall and in a kitchen where my daughter could hear it. "She has not been well since Travis. Somebody has to think about liability in this building." Nobody said anything. That was all. Nobody argued with her. The young mother with the stroller was looking at the floor. The man with the sling had his back turned, getting his phone off the windowsill. Vicky was standing with the pad in her hand, waiting for the doctor. Craig Yoakum did not answer her at all. He took the pad and walked back down the hallway with it. And out through the glass, in the parking lot, Doug Halstead was standing at the open back of that ambulance, with one hand on the door. And he had turned around and was looking through the window into that lobby at my sister while she said the part about liability. He did not come back in. He did not say one word to her, that day or any day after. He got in his truck and followed the ambulance to the hospital. I have thought about what would have broken her worse, and there is nothing. My sister has spent 15 years making sure that when people in this town say her name, the next thing they think of is that family. She would have taken being yelled at. Being yelled at by a Halstead in a lobby would have been a story she could tell. She got a man looking at her through a window for 4 seconds, and then leaving. I drove to the hospital because a nurse cannot not go, and I sat in the surgical waiting room on the 2nd floor for 2 hours without any right to be there. They put a stent in her at 7:40 that night. Doug Halstead came out at 9 and found me in that waiting room. He had a cup of coffee in each hand, and he gave me one without asking whether I wanted it, and sat down in the chair beside mine. And he was not a rich man in that room. He was a 52-year-old with his mother in a cardiac unit. "They said the first 10 minutes is everything," he said. "It usually is." He looked at the cup. "I was 8 minutes away. I was at the office on Dewey Avenue. 8 minutes. Then you were where you were supposed to be. Somebody has to be somewhere." We sat there a while. Then he asked what I did, and I told him. Nights at Cedar Hall, memory care, 11 to 7, 5 on. He asked why I had been at that clinic, and I told him the truth in about 4 sentences and no more than that. And I did not say a word about the house or the lawn or the yard sale, and I have never once been sorry about that. He said, "Angela Stubblefield's your sister." "Yes, sir." He turned the cup around in his hands, and he said, "Huh." And that was the entire extent of the revenge in this story, if you want to call it that. A man saying, "huh," in a hospital waiting room at 9 at night. Monday morning at 9:30, my sister came out the front door of Caney Valley Family Medicine carrying a bank bag and a pothos plant in a plastic pot. I was not there. I know exactly what it looked like because that town told me 11 different ways in 3 days. Vicky walked her out. It was her own front desk, her own lobby, her own 11 chairs, and she went out through them at 9:30 in the morning with a plant. There was no announcement. Nobody in this county puts out a statement about anything. In October, the flowers at that foundation luncheon at the country club were done by a woman named Peggy Ostrander, and the second table on the left in the fellowship hall did not save my sister a seat. And by Thanksgiving, she and Kyle had a place in Coffeyville, 30 miles north across the Kansas line, where she does billing for an orthopedic group. The house on Cherokee Avenue is hers. It is still hers. There was never any question about that, and there is not one now. She rented it in September for $950 to a family with 3 kids. I drove past it once that fall, and there was a trampoline in the backyard and a basketball goal at the end of the drive, and my mother's kitchen has somebody else's dishes in it, and I made my peace with that on the highway between Bartlesville and Dewey, somewhere around the second time I drove past. Janice Halstead came home from the hospital on the 11th of September and refused assisted living for the 3rd time in 2 years. Her son sent 2 agencies out to that house, and she sent both of them back down the driveway. Then she asked him for the woman from the lobby. She called me herself, 81 years old, on a landline, and what she said was, "I'm told I need somebody in the house. I'm not having a stranger. You've already had your hands on me, so you're not one. 3 days a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, 9 to 5, $32 an hour, private duty. Medications, blood pressures, wound check on her leg, driving her to cardiac rehab in Bartlesville, and to the Dollar General because she likes to buy her own greeting cards. I kept 2 nights a week at Cedar Hall through December because Sheila Ratzlaff took a phone call from a stranger on a Thursday in July and put me on a schedule. And you do not walk out on that. Nobody ever apologized to me. I want that in here because I have listened to a lot of stories where somebody comes to the door at the end with tears, and it did not happen to me, and I have stopped waiting for it. My Aunt Marcia called me once, in October, and talked about her knee for 4 minutes and then asked me not to complicate things at Christmas. I said I would not complicate anything. I did not go. Kyle sent one text in November. It said, "Hey, do you still have that toolbox of Travis?" I did not answer it. And Angela and I have not spoken since 4:38 on a Thursday afternoon in August, when she looked up from the appointment book and told me in front of 11 people that they had gone another direction. It is Sunday morning now, and I'm going to end here, because this is the picture I have instead of an apology. The kitchen in the duplex on Delaware Street is about 9 feet by 11. The faucet still drips. Leonard has been going to fix it since August. There is a table under the window that I bought at an estate sale in Dewey for $20, and pulled up to it, on the left side, is my mother's yellow vinyl kitchen chair with the split along the front lip, and the duct tape gone the color of a manila envelope. Ruby is kneeling on that chair, because she is 8 now, and she has decided that sitting is for other people, eating pancakes with too much syrup and telling me about a girl at the new school who has a horse. On the back of the kitchen door, my scrub top is hanging for tomorrow, navy, clean, with my badge clipped to the pocket. And on the hook beside it are my keys, with a hard blue plastic case on the ring, and a strip of white tape across the hinge. I'm Clara, and this is my channel. I love making these stories and sharing them with people across the world. If this one found you at the right time, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.